State witness Sergeant Thabo Mosia will continue to testify when the murder trial of former Bafana and Orlando Pirates goalkeeper Senzo Meyiwa resumes in the High Court in Pretoria this morning. Mosia was the first forensic officer to arrive at the mother's home of Meyiwa's then-girlfriend Kelly Khumalo, where he was shot and killed during an alleged robbery in 2014. SABC News senior reporter Chriselda Lewis has been covering the story and she joins us now. Very good morning to you, Chriselda. What can we expect today?
Well, Desiree, as you correctly point out, the cross-examination of Thabo Mosia continues this morning by Advocate Zandile Mshololo. Just before we adjourned yesterday for the day, a sharp focus was on what police did and did not do at the crime scene. Some bombshells, if I may, continue to emerge in this court, where we heard yesterday that Thabo Mosia, who told this court that at some point he'd taken over the scene, you would know that he was the first forensic detective who was on the scene on the night that Senzo Meyiwa was shot and killed. He basically told this court that he did not take any swabs or check for blood in the vehicle that had transported Senzo Meyiwa to hospital, despite the fact that it's believed that he had bled on his way to the hospital. That was certainly a point that raised eyebrows inside this court, where the defense is really trying to point to the aspect that police did very little to secure the scene at the house where Senzo Meyiwa was killed. And even when they did take evidence or swabs from the house, it was not correctly stored. The conduct of police is what is expected to come under a scrutiny once again in court this morning. Also, you would recall some witness statements that were in sharp focus just before we adjourned yesterday. Some statements from witnesses, including neighbors of the Khumalos, Kelly Khumalo's mother in Vosloorus, who basically said that when they entered the house, there'd been water on the floor, indicating perhaps that there had been some cleaning up that had been done. There had been some beer bottles that had been on the floor, alcohol bottles, if I may, and that one of the neighbors, Maggie Peary, had been cleaning in certain areas of the house. And when she was asked by one of the other witnesses who gave a statement why she was doing that, she said she was doing it because she didn't want police to see that the occupants in the house had been drinking. So Mosia conceding there that there's a huge possibility that there might have been some cleaning up that may have been done of the scene even way before he had arrived, and that the scene itself had been cordoned off before he had come to the scene. Also indications from him and him telling this court that he didn't take photographs, of crucial aspects of the house on the first visit to the crime scene, but instead did it on the second visit to the house. When asked about why he didn't do that, you'd recall he had always maintained that he was waiting for the crime scene task team to come and assist him. He seemed a little bit overwhelmed by what was taking place at the scene at the time. He merely says he was following procedure in waiting for the crime task team to come and assist there. So we're already expecting a sharp focus again this morning on why the cleanup of those bottles had been taking place, what was done after that had taken place, a concession as well from Thabo Mosia that, indeed he may have arrived after there had been some tampering of the scene itself. You would recall that he had indicated that he was told by the late Brigadier Philani Ndlovu where to take photographs of the scene. We know now that there had been some blood spatter that had been in the lounge area as well as on the walls in the kitchen. But questions raised about, even the tracking system. Recall that what we have currently is that Senzo Meyiwa had been taken to hospital from where he had been shot. He was also asked about whether he bothered to check the tracking system, about how long it would have taken those who had driven Senzo Meyiwa to hospital to that particular health facility to get assistance. That tracking system would have told you how long it took for the occupants in the house to travel from the crime scene to the hospital. So a lot of focus we're expecting today, perhaps on those statements from those witnesses that clearly indicate that there was some clean-up that had taken place at the crime scene before the first forensic detective had arrived.
Chriselda, I know you don't like it when I ask you to speculate, but just in terms of this testimony by Thabo Mosia, do you get a sense that it's just mere incompetence, or does it feed into the bigger story of there being a bigger ploy playing itself out here? And does it impact the real substance of the case, which is that seeking to find out what happened to Senzo Meyiwa?
Desiree, I love it when you ask me any question, and certainly I can answer this one. Look, it certainly paints a very, very bleak picture of what forensics did on the scene. It paints a bleak picture of what police did not do, which they were supposed to do when they arrived on the scene. It asks questions about whether police had responded timeously to the crime scene. We hear about Brigadier Philani Ndlovu, who is now late, who had sent Mosia, according to what he has told the court, to the hospital instead of sending him to the primary scene. There'd been no address for the crime scene. It took police at least 4 hours to respond to that particular crime scene. So when the pieces of the puzzle are now being put together, we're hearing from these witness statements that had been played out here in court yesterday, that some of these witnesses are indicating that there'd been a clean-up of the crime scene. Now, that is damning on what certainly will be able to be proved in this particular matter. Remember that the defense is certainly trying to say, number one, police didn't do their jobs. They did not secure the crime scene on time. There'd been tampering and contamination of that crime scene way before the first forensic detective had even arrived. Now, if you speak to those who are in, the forensics divisions within the South African Police Service or experts, they will tell you some of the most crucial evidence that was supposed to have been taken from the scene, including the gunshot residue from the hands of the occupants in the house to rule out any possibility that they may have pulled the trigger. The checking of blood spatter inside Senzo Meyiwa's car because it's believed that he was taken to the hospital after he had been shot. Issues of taking photographs where Thabo Mosia had taken the photographs. It simply does not make sense. Why would a forensic detective not have done some of the most basic things that were supposed to have been done at that crime scene, which certainly points to allegations and perhaps giving credence to some of the criticism that, police had done a shoddy job when it comes to having attended to the crime scene where Senzo Meyiwa was shot and killed, and what bearing this will have on the case. I'll leave that to the experts, but it certainly does not fare well at all for what police did when they got to the crime scene there.
Yeah. Are we starting at 10 a.m. again today?
Well, that's right, Desiree, and we're expecting more fireworks because it certainly seems that Advocate Zandile Mshololo will focus a lot on those statements where we heard that Maggie Phiri had been cleaning up the crime scene, removing bottles, and, there was some water that had also been found on the floor. Some of the neighbours who had also given witness statements saying they were quite perturbed by what they had seen, and one had even asked Maggie Phiri why she was cleaning the bottles from the floor, and she said she didn't want police to see that people had been drinking inside. You'd know that Advocate Zandile Mshololo had also asked Thabo Mosia whether the detectives who had been taking statements from those in the house, whether they were taking statements from people who had been drunk inside the house. That raised an objection from the state prosecutor, George Baloy, as well as the presiding judge, who said that, there's no indication at this point, not enough evidence to suggest that those that were inside the house may have been drunk, but we're expecting Advocate Zandile Mshololo to press much more on what is believed to have transpired there, and whether there'd been tampering and contamination of that scene before the first police officers, forensic detective Thabo Mosia, had arrived.
Chriselda, of course, look forward to watching live the events as they unfold.